Hi, everyone. I'm Joshua Zable, Chief Financial and Strategic Planning Officer at Minitab. I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working around a lot of engineers, a lot of statisticians who've taught me a lot of things over the years. And one of the things that I've learned to do and love doing is applying statistics to typical financial functions or financial analyses. Today, I'm going to share one specifically around AR turnover and DSOs and show you how one simple statistical tool, control charts, can help revolutionize the way you think about analyzing your AR turnover and your DSOs. Let's start by talking about the value of these statistical tools or the using statistics, and that is really identifying risks or false positives. And I'm going to show you specific examples over the course of this presentation of what I mean by that. A little bit about me in this webinar. This webinar is great for anyone who's part of a finance department or anybody that really is monitoring cash flow, whether you're a principal of a business or an owner of a business. Like I said, the goal here is to help you identify risks faster and frankly more accurately. As I said, I'm a CFO, also do strategic planning. I've worked on Wall Street, Main Street as well. So I've worked at companies of all different sizes and different types. This type of analysis is useful for all of those types of businesses I've been a part of and will definitely be a part of your business. So what you're going to hear today is concepts that you probably are familiar with, but a new way of thinking about how to analyze those concepts and those data points. So let's talk about AR turnover and DSOs, a review of what they are and why we look at them. So AR turnover or account receivable, you can see the formula there. It's really an accounting metric that measures how efficiently a company converts its credit sales into cash. So if it's telling you how efficiently you are, you want to be efficient, which means you want a high AR turnover ratio. It's important to understand your cash flow. And if it's low, it generally means that you're not collecting payments from customers as quickly as you should. We'll talk about the challenges with that. Days sales outstanding, also known as DSOs, are typically an inverse of it. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but basically measure of the average of the days of how long it takes you to collect payment. So again, while you want a high efficiency on your AR turnover, you want a low number of days sales outstanding because you want to be able to collect cash quickly. Again, higher DSO number would mean that it's taking longer to convert your sales into cash, which has an adverse impact on your cash flow. So why do they matter? At the end of the day, a low turnover or AR turnover, a high DSO can signal issues with your collections, your credit policies, or even broader economic conditions. Practically speaking, if you're not collecting your cash and you have bills to pay, that could really impact your cash conversion or your cash balances. And frankly, even your ability to operate a business, because if you can't pay your bills, things might shut you down. But generally speaking, we monitor these things because they're warning signs. It's a warning sign for a potential challenge in the future, specifically a cash crunch, but it also can be a warning sign for macro issues out there with your customers. And think about it yourself from a personal standpoint. If you're flush with cash, you're always very happy and very willing to pay your bills. When things get tighter, you might take a little bit longer to pay that bill just to make sure you have enough cash in the bank. So if your customers are taking longer to pay you, it could signal that they are experiencing challenges, which could have a ripple effect to your business, whether it be specifically with them or actually with other customers. Now let's look at current practices, how people monitor them. So the problem with today's practices of monitoring these two ratios and metrics are we use basic tools. We use Excel for the most part as a very popular tool in finance departments. We also use different BI tools and even ERP tools. And all of these things generally show the same thing. They show a graph or a schedule of your DSOs or your AR turnover, and it maybe shows a trend line potentially, maybe even an alert of when things are past due. But the key here really isn't about, people don't really have challenges monitoring this. The question is, how do they evaluate how they're doing? How do finance departments evaluate it? And it's generally done through experience and benchmarking. Now, some of those benchmarkings could be up to what's considered a standard, like, hey, DSOs under 45 days are considered good. You might benchmark it actually to industry. Well, in this industry, maybe a DSO number of 60 is considered good. And then you also look at your historical trends on how the business has done, how you're doing to maybe signal that something is changing. The issue here is that none of these tools actually address dealing with variability or variance or what's changing. They simply tell you what's going on and what has gone on in terms of general trends, but not really if something's changing. And that's really what you're trying to signal. So when we talk about something changing, one of the things we have to understand is there are different types of variance. There's normal or expected variance in a manufacturing or a quality world. That's also called common cause. If you think about it, if I asked you to write your name 10 times, it probably wouldn't look exactly the same as it did every single time. You expect it. It's predictable with some limits. They look similar. It doesn't mean that you forgot how to write your name. It just means that there's a normal level of variance in almost every process, including collecting money and payments. Think about paying your credit card bill. Do you pay it on the exact day of each month? So if maybe you pay it on the 14th one month and the 15th one month and the 16th one month, that would be a normal variance. When we start talking about unexpected or irregular variance, also called special cause, is really what the variance that we're looking for when we look at charting DSOs and AR turnover. It's that something has changed. If you pay your credit card every 15th, 14th, or 16th of the month, and then you start paying it on the 30th, it might imply something's changed, like you're not making enough money, and so you have to save more before you have to pay your credit card bill. When we look at the handwriting example, if all of a sudden one handwriting looked terribly different, you might suspect that the person who wrote their name 9 times didn't write it the 10th times. And that's really what finance departments are looking for. You're looking for, did something change unexpectedly? So how do they determine that? Well, they use judgment. They use their experience, both in terms of general experience and experience with the business. They look at historical trends and a trend line. And like I said, they look at benchmarking. What they don't use is statistics. And ironically, this should be the type of thing that's actually disciplined with rules. But really, it's leaned heavily on judgment on whether or not something material or important has changed. And there is a better way, and that's using statistics and a simple tool called control charts. And I'm going to walk through a few examples here of practical applications of how this works. And I think you'll start to see why I'm talking about control charts and the value they bring and why statistics are so critical to these decisions. So I've used quotes, sample quotes from public company conference calls. I've changed them a little bit so that I'm not taking exactly, but these are real life examples. So let's take example 1. A CFO goes to the boardroom or they go to their investors and they think, hey, look at that chart, DSOs spiked. And you can see the quote, as you know, our business has some seasonalities and DSOs tend to be higher in Q4 due to heavy end of year shipments. This pattern is consistent with prior years. And if you look at that graph from Excel, you will see that in December of 23, the DSOs spiked there almost to 65. And then in December of 24, they spiked to over 70. Not a major change, a little bit larger, but similar with pattern. And so the CFO might say, the pattern is consistent, the seasonality, we're fine. Now let's look at it under a statistical lens. When you look at it in a control chart, it actually highlights that that last spike in your DSOs is actually not fine. It's not consistent with your pattern. It's unexpected variance. And so here's a perfect example of you think you don't have a risk, that there's normal variance, but it's not normal. It's irregular. And so this gives you a clue. Do I need to take an action now? Now, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But in the first example, you wouldn't even think about this without getting this call out. Again, similar pattern of a chart, but the statistics are telling you that something has changed. Let's look at another example. I love this one because this is where a CFO takes credit for improving. We're pleased to report our DSOs improved by about 3 days. That reflects better discipline and a stronger enforcement of payment terms. So maybe the CFO or the finance team or the sales team put actions into place, Maybe they even just gave a talk to people. And you're looking at this trend and you're saying, look, boss, we're doing better. We're collecting money faster than we were. Our improvements have paid off. When you look at it with a statistical lens, you actually see there really isn't a statistical difference between the new quote unquote improvement to what they were doing before. So this really falls under normal variance. Now, why does that matter? One, you might think your sales team is executing on a plan, and this really doesn't demonstrate that they are. Maybe they are, but this doesn't demonstrate or prove anything, or that your finance team's executing on doing something differently. Equally importantly, you might have put into place activities that you think are making a difference that are causing extra work or extra time that actually aren't making an impact. So this raises the question, is the effort worth the results? Now you could say, sure, let's wait another month, but you can see here that without the statistical proof, you're not seeing abnormal variance. This is just normal variance. So you'd be getting this improvement from luck as much as you could from the improvements you made in place. And here's the last example. DSOs was 83 days at the end of Q4 compared to 85, a 2-day improvement over Q3, and well within our target range of less than 90 days. So we talked about benchmarking. Here's a CFO that's saying our benchmark is 90. We're well below 90. And we're not really concerned about the spike because we are well below 90. And on top of that, we feel even better because where we spiked to 85, we've come down to 83. So everything is on track. When you look at it with a statistical lens, you learn a couple of things. First of all, 90 days based on your historical data probably isn't the right target range. It probably should be something like 82. And so 90 is giving you a lot more room, which means you could have a lot potential risk in there until you hit 90. And when you hit 90, it might be too late. You might be having payment issues or a cash crunch. The other thing that's interesting about this example is you went to 85 days, and now you're looking with false hope that 83 is better than 85. And really, you should be saying, we have a major problem. We just had 2 data points in a row with unexpected variance. We need to address this problem. So you can see here 3 examples where pretty standard comments by a finance team or a CFO, where without the power of statistics, you really aren't making an educated guess at what's going on. Now, let's talk about how you'd improve these. So if you are the last CFO or the last member of the finance team that showed that, and you recognize with the help of statistics that you really do have unaccounted for variance or unexpected variance, you want to make improvements. Let's talk about how to do that. So first of all, you want to optimize your credit policies. You can offer incentives for tightening credit terms, credit limits, a different collection strategy. Interestingly enough, while we're all used to emails and calls, letters actually work quite well on collections. They give you some more authority around it. And then you can also prioritize the high value accounts. So you might want to optimize your credit policies. There's all sorts of different ways of doing that. Another way might be to evaluate your invoicing process. This might be a great opportunity to use a lean tool like a value stream map or a process map to actually map out your invoicing process and understand what's going on to find inefficiencies. But you can see, you can ensure invoices are accurate and sent promptly. You can provide different payment options. Maybe it's easier for people paying a credit card and you're not offering that. Clear payment terms. I don't love incentivizing early payments, but if you're in a cash crunch and you need it, that's one way also to drive faster invoicing and faster collections. And lastly, and these are a little bit like motherhood and apple pie, but you always want to improve your customer communications. You want to be clear on what you expect from them, and you want to be understanding of what they expect from you and what their intention is. And that's where customer service comes into play, because if you have a positive relationship with your customer, you'll understand what's going on, which also provides more qualitative information around those quantitative analyses that I showed you to let you know, do we really have a problem? Just because it's unexpected doesn't mean it's problematic. But the first thing to understand is it unexpected? And if it is, if that variability was not expected, is it a problem for you? So to conclude, the simple takeaway is use control charts instead of simple charts. Control charts are very easy to use. They're very easy to understand, as you just saw a number of examples. But in general, I think it's a great opportunity to harness the power of statistics for your DSOs and AR turnover. And I think there's a lot of other opportunities to harness statistics as well. So the next time you're looking at evaluating something, whether it be evaluating an analysis that you're doing, think of statistics. Think about how much more powerful you are with statistical analysis. Imagine yourself in a boardroom and you just had your DSO spike, and a board member says, "Why are DSOs spiking?" Rather than having to come up with various excuses or reasons, whether it be seasonality or an anomaly, wouldn't it be so much more powerful to say, let me show you a control chart. This is just simply normal variance. It's expected. There's nothing here. There's nothing to talk about. That's powerful because it's a clear message. It demonstrates your command of the data. And frankly, the graphic shows and explains itself without creating any more questions. So stay tuned for more. If you have other ideas on other ways to use statistics for finance teams, or you're curious about specific ways of doing it, reach out. Look forward to chatting with you and look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you very much.